The judge's mouth is moving. I can't hear the words, just the fluorescent buzz overhead and the sound of my fingernails scraping the wood grain on the table in front of me. 43 years. That's how long I slept next to a man who practiced my signature in secret. Not forged, practiced. Like a kid learning cursive. Loop the S, soften the tail on the N. Get the slant right, so even a handwriting expert would call it consistent with known samples. They found the evidence in his desk. Not hidden, just there. Sheets and sheets of my name, over and over, getting better each time. The way you'd practice a song before performing it. That's what makes me sick. The care he took. The patience. The bank says I benefited from the fraud, so I'm guilty by luxury. Look at the photos. Billy in Aruba. Billy with new earrings. Billy smiling in a car she didn't know was bought with her stolen signature. They're not wrong. I did enjoy it. But here's the thing. I thought we paid cash. The gavel comes down. I don't know yet if I've won or lost. 3 weeks after I buried Richard, a man in a brown uniform knocked on my door and handed me an eviction notice. Not condolences, not a casserole. A court order for immediate possession of property due to foreclosure. I stood there, still in my bathrobe, holding the paper like it was written in a language I didn't speak. The mortgage was supposed to be paid off in 1999. I remember the party we threw. Champagne and plastic flutes. Richard kissed me and said, "This is ours now, forever." 27 years later, I'm learning forever had an expiration date I never saw. They're calling it fraud. Not his fraud. Mine. Because I lived in the house, drove the car, wore the jewelry. The bank's lawyer is a woman with a shellacked bun who keeps using the word benefit, as if love and complicity are the same thing. As if not asking questions is the same as signing your name. But I didn't sign my name. Richard did. For me. As me. Hundreds of times. And now I'm expected to pay for it. The lawyer's shellac is cracking. I can see it from where I'm sitting. A tiny fissure near her left temple, where a strand of hair has escaped. She's been talking for 7 minutes straight, and I've counted every second by watching that crack widen. Her voice is a drone. Legal words that sound like they should mean something, but collapse into noise when you try to hold them. Mrs. Sison, you maintain that you had no knowledge of the loans secured against your property between 2003 and 2019. Is that correct? Correct. But she doesn't wait for my answer. She's already clicking to the next slide. It's a photo of me. Richard's arm around my shoulders. We're standing on a cruise ship deck, and I'm wearing a necklace I don't remember buying. The ocean behind us is too blue to be real. I look happy. That's the trap, isn't it? Looking happy is evidence now. This voyage was paid for via a home equity line of credit. HELOC number 4472B, opened March 2008. You were listed as co-applicant. I wasn't. The signature on the application matches exemplars provided by your bank, your mortgage company, and your vehicle registration. It does. That's the sick genius of it. Richard didn't scribble my name on a napkin and hope for the best. He studied me. He spent years tracing the way my hand moved, the pressure I applied to the pen, the angle of my wrist when I signed birthday cards. By 2008, he wasn't forging anymore. He was channeling. He'd become me on paper. The judge, a man named Horace Wren, who looks like he's been alive since the invention of ink, clears his throat. He's holding the document I submitted last week. The one my daughter found in Richard's desk after I'd already given up looking. A yellow sticky note, 2 inches square, with Richard's handwriting on it. Practice the S loop. Too sharp still. Too sharp still. Those 3 words are the only reason I'm not already packing boxes. Ms. Keller, the judge says, addressing the shellacked lawyer, your client is aware that premeditation negates the innocent spouse defense the bank is attempting to invoke here? She blinks. The crack widens. Your Honor, the defendant benefited materially from— I'm not asking about benefit. I'm asking about intent. If Mr. Sison practiced the forgery, he knew it was wrong, which means the bank accepted fraudulent collateral, which means Mrs. Sison is not liable for the repayment of a loan she never agreed to. The air in the courtroom changes. It gets thinner. I can breathe again. Keller's mouth opens, closes. She adjusts her bun, which doesn't need adjusting. We'd like to request a recess to consult. Denied. Horace Wren looks at me for the first time all day. His eyes are gray and tired. Mrs. Sison, did you ever sign any documents related to Sison Ventures or HELOC 4472B? My voice cracks when I answer. No. He nods once. Then this court finds— That's when my chest locks. My chest locked the same way 6 months earlier, standing in the funeral home while a man I'd never met told 200 people that Richard Sison was a saint. Not a good man. A saint. The eulogist was Richard's former business partner, a guy named Dennis with a comb-over and a Rotary Club pin. He kept saying pillar of the community like it was Richard's legal name. Every sentence landed like a shovel of dirt. I sat in the front row between my daughter and an empty space where Richard's brother was supposed to sit, but didn't, because they hadn't spoken in 14 years over something Richard refused to explain. The casket was closed. Richard wanted it that way. No one needs to see me like that, he'd said 3 days before he died, his voice already thin from the morphine. I thought he meant the cancer. Now I wonder if he meant the guilt. Dennis wrapped up his speech with a story about Richard volunteering at a youth baseball league, coaching kids, teaching them discipline. I remembered that summer. Richard came home late every Tuesday, smelling like grass and sweat, and I'd have dinner waiting. He'd kiss my forehead and say, "You're too good to me, Bill." I believed him. The service ended. People filed past me, squeezing my hand, whispering things I didn't retain. My daughter sobbed into a tissue that disintegrated in her fist. I stayed dry-eyed. Not because I wasn't sad, because my body had shut down the way it does when you're drowning and your lungs decide to stop fighting. Then I saw him. A man in a black suit standing at the back of the chapel, checking his watch. Not crying, not pretending to. Just standing there like he was waiting for a bus. Everyone else had left except the funeral director, who was hovering near the guest book with an anxious smile. The man in the suit walked toward me, not slow, not fast, and stopped 3 feet away. He didn't introduce himself. He handed me a business card. Gregory Parnell, Senior Recovery Specialist, First Continental Bank. Call me, he said. His voice was flat, Midwestern. It's urgent. What? He glanced at the casket, then back at me. Your husband had accounts with us. Plural. They're delinquent. We need to discuss repayment options before this becomes a legal matter. My daughter was still 10 feet away, talking to an aunt. I looked at the card. The letters blurred. There's a mistake, I said. Richard didn't have business accounts. He worked for the school district. He retired in 2015. Parnell's face didn't change. Mrs. Sison, your husband borrowed $640,000, using your home as collateral. The first missed payment was logged 8 weeks ago. The carpet under my feet tilted. That's impossible. He adjusted his tie. I wish it were. Then he left. I kept Parnell's card in my coat pocket for 3 days before I could make myself look at it again. The paper had gone soft from being touched too many times, the ink smudging near the edges. $640,000. The number didn't fit inside my skull. I'd never seen that much money in one place. Richard's pension was decent. We traveled once a year, maybe twice. We weren't rich, but we weren't broke either. Or so I thought. On the fourth day, I went to his study. The door was locked. It had been locked since Richard got too weak to walk there himself. He'd asked me to bring him files a few times near the end. Insurance papers, the will, his VA documents. But he never let me go in alone. "I'll come with you," he'd say, even when standing made him shake. "It's a mess in there." "I don't want you tripping over something." I stood outside the door for 20 minutes, key in hand. Found it in a hollowed-out Bible on the bookshelf, not even hidden well. The pages had been carved out in a rectangle, and the key sat there like a bookmark. The irony made my teeth hurt. The lock turned easy. Too easy. Like it had been oiled recently. Inside, the room was empty. Not messy. Empty. The desk was bare, except for a lamp with no bulb. The filing cabinet drawers hung open, all 4 of them, with nothing inside but the metal tracks where folders used to slide. The walls were naked, no frames, no certificates, no photos of Richard shaking hands with the superintendent at his retirement party. Even the corkboard above the desk had been stripped clean. Just pinholes in a grid pattern, like 100 tiny wounds. In the corner sat a paper shredder, industrial-sized, the kind you see in offices, not homes. The bin was full. I knelt down and pulled it out. Confetti. Thousands of strips no wider than a fingernail, all white except for fragments of black ink. I sifted through it with both hands, trying to find a piece big enough to read. Most of it was gibberish. Half a letterhead, a corner of a signature line, the number 8 floating alone. But then I found one strip that said, Sison Ventures, LLC, in Times New Roman, and another that said Billy M. Sison, co-applicant. My maiden name. He'd used my maiden name. I sat on the floor with confetti in my lap and tried to remember the last time I'd been inside this room when Richard was alive. Couldn't. He'd claimed it 20 years ago when he started doing consulting work for the district, and I'd respected his space the way you respect a closed door. He never locked it back then. The lock came later. 5 years ago? 6? I should have asked why. The shredder hummed when I plugged it in, still warm, like it had been used yesterday. Richard had been dead for 4 days. The shredder was still plugged in when the sheriff knocked. I heard it humming 2 rooms away, a mechanical purr that made my stomach clench every time I walked past Richard's study. I'd been avoiding the room for days, sleeping on the couch, because our bedroom felt too big without him and too small with the weight of what I'd found. The knock came at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. 3 hard raps, official and impatient. I opened the door in yesterday's clothes. The man on my porch wore a brown uniform and held a clipboard like a shield. Behind him, a white sedan idled in my driveway with county plates. Billy Sison? Yes. He didn't apologize, just handed me a manila envelope thick enough to choke on. You're being served notice of foreclosure proceedings initiated by First Continental Bank. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises or arrange alternative payment terms with the lien holder. I stared at the envelope. My name was typed on a label in Helvetica. Billy M. Sison. Not Mrs., not Ms. Just my name, flat and factual. There's a mistake, I said. My voice sounded fear away. We paid off the mortgage in 1999. The sheriff shifted his weight. He'd done this before. Probably did it 3 times a week. Ma'am, the notice explains the legal basis for repossession. If you have documentation proving otherwise, you'll need to present it to the court before the hearing date listed on page 4. He left before I could ask what hearing. Inside, I ripped open the envelope. Papers spilled onto the kitchen table. 8 pages stapled together, dense with legalese and highlighted sections. The amount due was printed in bold at the top of page 2. $687,340. 12. Not 640,000. More. Interest had been accruing since Richard's death, compounding daily at a rate I couldn't calculate without a calculator I didn't want to touch. Then I saw the name of the debtor. Sison Ventures, LLC primary applicant. Richard A. Sison co-applicant. Billy M. Sison, not a mortgage. A business loan. I flipped to the collateral section. Our house was listed first. The address I'd lived at for 38 years. The place where I'd raised my daughter and buried 2 dogs and painted the kitchen cabinets 3 times because I could never get the color right. Below that, a second property I didn't recognize. An address in Riverside I'd never heard Richard mention. My hands shook so hard the papers rattled. Sison Ventures. He'd named it after me, used my maiden name like a brand, like I was the face of whatever scheme he'd been running. I wasn't just a victim, I was the logo. I called the number on Parnell's card. He answered on the first ring. Mrs. Sison, I was expecting your call. What is Sison Ventures? Silence. Then, you don't know? No. We should meet in person. We met in person at a Denny's off the interstate because Parnell said his office wasn't appropriate for this kind of conversation. He meant it would be recorded. Every word logged. He ordered coffee he didn't drink and spread the loan documents across the table like he was dealing cards. Sison Ventures was registered in 2003, he said. Consulting firm. Your husband was listed as CEO. You were listed as CFO and co-signatory on all major transactions. I never signed anything. Parnell slid a photocopy toward me. My signature sat at the bottom of a promissory note dated March 12, 2008. The handwriting was mine. The looping B, the sharp downstroke on the Y, even the way I crossed my T slightly left of center. I'd been signing my name for 63 years. I knew what it looked like. This was it. That's not possible, I said. Mrs. Sison, I understand this is difficult, but the bank has verified. I didn't sign this. He leaned back. His coffee was getting cold. Then you're claiming forgery. Yes. Do you have proof? I thought about the confetti in Richard's study. The practice sheets my daughter swore she'd seen once but couldn't find now. The yellow sticky note I hadn't discovered yet because it was still buried in the shredder bin under layers of pulverized evidence. Not yet. Parnell checked his watch. You have 19 hours before the eviction is enforceable. If you're serious about contesting this, you need a forensic document examiner. Someone who can testify that the signatures were forged. How much does that cost? More than you have. He wasn't wrong. Richard's life insurance had a suicide clause that voided the payout if death occurred within 2 years of a terminal diagnosis. The cancer killed him at 18 months. I got nothing. I found the examiner through a paralegal my daughter knew from college. His name was Tom Ehrlich, and he worked out of a converted garage in Pomona that smelled like toner and old paper. $75 an hour. I had enough for 2 hours if I skipped groceries. He looked at the loan documents under a magnifying lamp with a jeweler's precision, tracing each letter with a wooden stylus. Didn't speak for 20 minutes. I watched his eyes move, left to right, down, back up. He flipped to a signature card the bank had provided, something I'd signed in 1987 when we refinanced. Finally, he sat back. This isn't a forgery, he said. My chest collapsed. This is a trace. He pulled out a light box and placed the 2 signatures on top of each other. They aligned perfectly. Too perfectly. See how the pressure is inconsistent? Here, on the S, it's heavy. But here, on the I, it's feathered. That's not how people sign their names. That's how they trace. He looked at me. Someone copied your signature using a light source, probably from an original document. Your marriage certificate, maybe. A deed. My husband did this? Ehrlich nodded. For years, by the look of it. For years. Ehrlich's words followed me out of his garage and into my car, and through the 17-mile drive home, where I white-knuckled the steering wheel and didn't blink. Years meant this wasn't a mistake. Years meant Richard woke up hundreds of mornings, kissed me over coffee, and went into his locked study to practice being me on paper. The deposition happened 4 days later in a conference room that smelled like artificial lemon and anxiety. Parnell wasn't there. The bank sent someone worse, a lawyer named Keller, with a bun so tight it looked like it hurt. She had a PowerPoint ready. Slide 1 was a photo of me and Richard in Aruba. The sky was aggressively blue. I was wearing a sundress I'd forgotten I owned and a necklace that caught the light weird. Richard's arm was around my waist. We looked like an ad for retirement planning. This trip was funded by a $32,000 withdrawal from the Sison Ventures operating account, Keller said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. March 2009. Do you recall this vacation? Yes. Did you enjoy it? My lawyer, a public defender named Aaron who looked 12, started to object, but I answered first. Yes. Keller smiled. Not warm. Victorious. She clicked to the next slide. A car. Silver Camry. I'd driven it for 6 years before the transmission gave out. This vehicle was purchased using a $28,000 cashier's check drawn from the same account. May 2011. You were the primary driver, correct? Yes. Click. Jewelry. A bracelet I wore to my daughter's wedding. Emeralds. Richard said reminded him of my eyes, which was corny, but I loved it anyway. Purchased at Belden Jewelers, December 2013. Invoice total, $4,200. Paid in cash withdrawn from... I get it, I said. Keller paused, raised an eyebrow. Do you? You're saying I benefited, that because I enjoyed the money, I'm responsible for paying it back. Not just responsible, complicit. She clicked again. This time the slide was a legal document I didn't understand, full of highlighted sections. California law recognizes the doctrine of ratification. If a party knowingly accepts the benefits of a fraudulent transaction, they implicitly consent to the terms of that transaction. You lived in a house secured by fraudulent debt, vacationed on fraudulent credit, wore fraudulent jewelry. I didn't know it was fraudulent. Did you ask where the money came from? The room got smaller. No. Why not? Because I trusted him. Because asking felt like accusing. Because every time I started to wonder about the late-night phone calls, or the locked drawers, or the way Richard's jaw tightened when I mentioned refinancing, I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriages need trust. Questions are erosion. I chose peace. Keller closed her laptop. Mrs. Sison, ignorance isn't innocence. It's negligence. You had a duty to inquire. You didn't. That makes you liable. Aaron finally spoke. That's not how fraud works. Keller smiled again. Tell it to the judge. The judge set the trial date for 6 weeks out, which meant I had 6 weeks to find evidence that would prove Richard was a liar, and I wasn't an accomplice. Aaron said we needed character witnesses, people who could testify that I wasn't the kind of person who'd commit fraud. I made a list. Friends from the library where I'd worked for 23 years. Our neighbor who'd watched me garden every Sunday for a decade. My sister in Ohio, who barely spoke to me, but might show up out of obligation. Then I called my daughter. Maya lived 40 minutes away in a condo she'd bought with her fiancé, a software engineer named Kyle, who wore fleece vests in July. She came over that night with takeout I couldn't eat and sat across from me at the kitchen table, like we were strangers negotiating a hostage situation. "I need you to testify," I said. She picked at her noodles, wouldn't look at me. "Testify what? That I didn't know about the loans, that Dad kept me in the dark." Her chopsticks stopped moving. "Mom!" The way she said it, soft, like an apology, made my spine go cold. "What?" "I can't do that." "Why not?" She set the chopsticks down, folded her hands. Her nails were bitten bloody. "Because it's not true." The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. I heard every sound except the one I needed, which was Maya telling me I'd misunderstood. "What are you talking about?" "Dad told me about Seesaw Ventures 3 years ago. He needed money he said it was a cash flow thing, temporary. He asked me not to tell you because you'd worry." My vision tunneled. "How much?" $12,000. "You gave him $12,000? He said he'd pay me back. He did, actually. 6 months later, with interest." She finally looked at me, and her eyes were red. "Mom, he swore it was legitimate. A business loan that hit a snag. He showed me papers. It looked real." "Did you see my signature on those papers?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Did you think it was strange that I never mentioned running a business?" "I thought you were helping him, like a partner thing." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know he was forging. I swear, I thought you knew." I stood up, needed to move, paced to the sink and back. 3 years. You knew for 3 years and never said anything." "He made me promise." "He's dead, Maya." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "So what was I supposed to do?" she said. "March in here a week after the funeral and tell you Dad was a criminal? That I helped him? That I took money from a fraud scheme with your name on it?" Tears now, fat and fast. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" "From this." She gestured at the foreclosure notice still sitting on the counter, at the half-empty house, at me. "From knowing that everyone you trusted was lying to you, including me." The takeout was getting cold. "Get out," I said. She left without arguing. The takeout sat on the counter for 2 days before I threw it away. I stopped answering Maya's calls. Stopped answering anyone's calls. Aaron left voicemails about depositions and document requests, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, distant and garbled. I existed in the space between eviction and trial, floating in a house that wasn't mine anymore, surrounded by furniture I'd picked out with a man who'd spent 40 years stealing my identity one signature at a time. On the 3rd night, I went back to Richard's study. The shredder bin was still full. I'd looked through it once, found the strips that said Seesaw Ventures and co-applicant, then given up because piecing together confetti felt like trying to unburn a book. But Aaron had said we needed a smoking gun, something that proved intent. Tracing my signature was bad. Practicing it was worse. I dumped the bin onto the floor. Thousands of pieces, maybe tens of thousands, all white with fragments of black ink bleeding through. Started sorting by thickness first, regular paper versus cardstock, then by font. Times New Roman in one pile, Arial in another, handwritten scraps in a third. My knees ached. I'd been kneeling for an hour, maybe 2. Lost track of time the way you do when you're searching for something you're not sure exists. Then I found it. A yellow sticky note, torn in half. The adhesive strip was still intact on one piece. The handwriting was Richard's. I'd know it anywhere. The cramped, slanted print he used for grocery lists and birthday cards. The first half said, "Note to self. Practice the I searched for 10 more minutes before I found the second piece." Buried under a cluster of shredded bank statements. S-loop. Too sharp still. Too sharp still. I held both pieces together under the desk lamp. The tear matched perfectly. This wasn't a draft. This was a reminder. Richard had written himself a note about how to better forge my signature, then shredded it like it was a receipt for coffee instead of evidence of a crime he'd been committing for years. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I found an envelope in the desk drawer, empty, miraculously unshredded, and slid both pieces inside. Sealed it. Wrote the date on the front in my own handwriting, which suddenly felt like an act of defiance. This was my S-loop. Mine. The sharp one Richard had spent years trying to replicate and smooth out so he could use it against me. I called Aaron at 11 p.m. He answered groggy, annoyed. "I found it," I said. "Found what?" "Proof." He knew it was wrong. He practiced. He left evidence. Silence. Then I heard rustling. He was sitting up. "What kind of evidence?" "A note, in his handwriting, telling himself to fix the S in my signature because it was too sharp." Aaron exhaled slow. "That's premeditation." "I know." "Billy, this changes everything." I looked at the envelope. Good. The envelope sat in my purse for 3 weeks, while Aaron filed motions and Keller filed counter motions, and the trial date crept closer, like a deadline I couldn't outrun. I didn't tell Maya about the note, didn't tell anyone except Aaron, who had it tested by Ehrlich to confirm the handwriting matched Richard's signature on our marriage certificate. It did. Of course it did. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a flag in the corner that hung limp because there was no air movement. I sat at a table with Aaron while Keller sat across from us with 2 paralegals who looked like they'd graduated law school last month. The gallery was half empty. A few reporters. A woman from the bank I didn't recognize. Maya wasn't there. Judge Wren entered. We stood, sat. He read through the case summary with the enthusiasm of someone reading microwave instructions. Keller went first, showed the same photos from the deposition, Aruba, the Camry, the emerald bracelet. Argued benefit and ratification and willful blindness. She made me sound complicit, greedy, a woman who'd looked the other way because the view was better with jewelry on. Then Aaron called me to the stand. The Bible they gave me to swear on was smaller than the one Richard had hollowed out to hide the key. I put my hand on it anyway. Sat down. The chair was hard. Keller watched me like a hawk eyeing a field mouse. Aaron asked the softballs first. How long were you married? Did you work? Did you have access to Richard's financial records? I answered in sentences I'd rehearsed, keeping my voice steady even when my pulse wasn't. Then he asked the question we'd practiced 20 times. Mrs. Sison, did you ever sign documents related to Sison Ventures? No. Did you know your signature was being used without your consent? Not until after Richard died. Aaron walked to the evidence table and picked up the envelope, held it like it was fragile. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit G into evidence. Wren nodded. Aaron handed it to me. Can you tell the court what this is? I opened the envelope, pulled out the 2 pieces of yellow paper, still torn, still damning. My throat was dry. I cleared it once, twice. This is a note my husband wrote to himself. It says, Note to self. Practice the S loop. Too sharp still. The courtroom was silent. Can you explain what that means? It means he was practicing my signature, trying to make it look more like mine. He knew it wasn't right. The S was too sharp, so he kept working on it. Aaron turned to Keller. Your client argued that Mrs. Sison ratified the fraud by accepting its benefits. But this note proves Richard Sison knew he was committing fraud, which means the bank accepted fraudulent collateral. Keller stood. Objection. Hearsay. Wren held up the note, squinting at Richard's handwriting. Overruled. This is a statement against interest by a party no longer available to testify. He looked at me. Mrs. Sison, did you ever give your husband permission to sign your name? No? Did you benefit from the loans? I thought about the cruise, the car, the bracelet. Yes, but I didn't know where the money came from. I thought we'd saved it. Wren set the note down. Then this court finds the debt was incurred through fraud in the factum. The bank's claim is dismissed. The gavel came down. I could breathe again. The gavel's echo followed me out of the courthouse and into the parking lot where the sun was too bright and the air tasted like exhaust and freedom. Aaron shook my hand, firm, professional, already thinking about his next case. Keller didn't look at me, just packed her briefcase with sharp, angry movements and left through a side door like she was fleeing a crime scene. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could turn the key. The house was still mine. Legally. The judge had dismissed the bank's claim, which meant the foreclosure was void, which meant I could stay. Aaron had explained it twice, slowly, like I was a child learning fractions. You won, Billy. The debt isn't yours. You're free. Free. I drove home, parked in the driveway where the sheriff's car had idled weeks ago, unlocked the front door, stood in the entryway and looked at 40 years of my life arranged on shelves and walls and tables. The couch Richard and I had bought in 1987. The coffee table Maya had carved her initials into when she was 6. The wedding photo in the hallway where we both looked impossibly young, and Richard's hand rested on my shoulder like a promise. I couldn't stay here. Not because the bank would come back, because every room was haunted by a man I'd never actually known. The Richard I'd loved was a character he'd performed. The real Richard was the one who traced my signature under a light box and practiced the S-loop until it was smooth enough to fool a forensic analyst. I'd spent 43 years married to a forgery. I listed the house the next morning. It sold in 3 weeks to a couple with twin toddlers who didn't ask why I was selling or why I looked relieved when they signed the offer. I took the cash, enough to rent an apartment in a city 2 hours away where nobody knew my name or Richard's, and left most of the furniture behind. Let the new owners have it. The couch, the table, the wedding photo. On my last day, I went to Richard's study one final time. The shredder was still there. I unplugged it, carried it to the curb for trash pickup. Inside, the confetti had settled into compact layers, compressed by its own weight into something almost solid. Evidence turned to sediment. I drove to the bank after that. Not First Continental. A different one, smaller, local. The kind where the teller knows your name because you're the only customer in line. I'd like to open an account, I told the woman behind the counter. Joint or individual? Individual. She handed me a form. I filled it out in my own handwriting, the sharp S-loop, the slanted I, the crossed ET that leaned left. At the bottom, I signed my name once, just once. Mine. The woman smiled. Welcome, Ms. Season. Not Mrs. Ms. I smiled back. Thank you. Outside, the sun was still too bright, but I could look at it now without flinching. If this story made you check who's listed on your mortgage, you're already asking the right questions. Subscribe, because the next case we're covering involves a mother, a will, and a nursing home administrator who thought no one was counting the signatures. We're just getting started.